Welcome everyone to Parashat Shavua with Rebbe Shlomo Carlebach, taken from the book Evan Shlomo. Before we start, I had a request to have a dedication for the Yahrzeit of Noach ben Chaim. This is Lori Wolf Poland's father, Alav Shalom. So I think maybe later someone will say a few words, but Noach ben Chaim should have an aliyat neshama. This coming week is a double portion, Mattot and Masei. And with that, we finish the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. So this is the end of the fourth book of the Torah, and the parsha always before Tisha B'Av is Devarim. The first parsha of Deuteronomy is always read the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, but this week we're ending with two parshas. In Evan Shlomo, the text that we're using, relative to the rest of the parshas, there is much less material here, but more than enough for us to get to the class. So I'm going to split the class more or less in half between Parashat Mattot and Parashat Masei, though I think there'll be a little bit more for Mattot because there's one longer Torah that we're going to try to get through the whole thing. So before we start, I just want to mention that the Parashat Mattot begins with the idea of taking a vow. I'm just mentioning it because that's the first thing Reb Shlomo is going to address, and that's the beginning of the Parsha. Who can take a vow, how you can annul a vow, how careful you have to be with your words. And that's how the Parsha begins. So, and then I'll also mention that Mattot literally mean a mateh is a staff, but it's also the same word for a tribe. And here we see, because we're at the end of the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, the entire book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, takes place in 37 days. So many people, we're going to see much later, treat the end of the book of Midbar, the end of the fourth book, as if it's the end of the Torah. Because one of the terms that we use for the book of Devarim is Mishneh Torah, which means like a review of the Torah, a repeat of the Torah, going over not only the Torah, but the whole history. Moshe Rabbeinu goes through our whole history and also the whole future. So that's just an introduction, so we have the context of what Reb Shlomo is going to be talking about. For those who have the book, we're starting at page 404, and we're only going to do the first two paragraphs. So Reb Shlomo, he calls this a holy vitamin. So he says, after Pinchas comes Parashat Nedarim. Now, Nedarim is the word for neder, a vow. He says Parshas Nedarim. That's not the name of the Parsha, but there's a whole tractate of Gemara called Nedarim, because the first subject is vows. So sometimes the whole Parsha is referred to as Parashat Nedarim. So he says, after Pinchas comes Parashat Nedarim, the portion of making a vow. When I make a vow, I'm connecting myself. Yaakov Avinu is leaving the Holy Land, and on the first night, he sleeps under the stars outside of Israel. He couldn't bear being outside the land of Israel. So what did God do? All of Israel came and lay down beneath him. And he quotes the Gemara here. I need to explain this a little bit better. The Midrash says when, after Yaakov gets the blessing, takes the blessing from his father Yitzchak, Esav, when he finds out, is outraged and wants to kill Yaakov. And so Yitzchak and Rivka send Yaakov away, and they don't mention, you better leave because your brother's about to kill you, but they do send him away that it's time for him to find a wife. And so when he's leaving for many reasons. One is to save his life, and the other, it's time for him to get married. And this is when Yaakov has his famous dream of the ladder with the angels going up and coming down, and God appearing and speaking to him. But the Midrash says that, and there's different ways to take it, that he had actually left Israel. And then he thought, how can I leave Israel and not pay my respects to what will later be called Harabayit? And so the Temple Mount. So he retraces his steps, and according to tradition, that's where he has the dream. And here where Reb Shlomo is mentioning that God folded up all of Israel. So in the text, when God comes to speak to him on the top of the ladder, and he says, all the land that you are lying on, I will give to you and your children forever. So Rashei, if you look at it like very, very literally, it sounds like the very land that you're lying on, meaning the amount of space that your body takes. That's what I'm giving to you and your children. And so Rashei has to deal with this. And that's the Gemara that Reb Shlomo is quoting here. And Rashei brings that God folded up all of Israel underneath Yaakov to tell him, just like it would be easy to conquer or take possession of the land that you're lying on, so it will be with all of Israel. And for anyone who has my book on dreams, there's a whole section about the secret of folding up space that I deal with based on this Gemara. So Reb Shlomo continues. He had this unbelievable dream, and the next morning he made a vow. That's why he's bringing this, because that's the first time a vow is mentioned in the Torah. And we're told anytime a word or a concept is first introduced in the Torah, Reb Shlomo used to use the word, it's its headquarters. It's its ultimate context. So it's Yaakov Avinu who makes the first vow. And so since the Parsha that we're learning for next week is about vows, Reb Shlomo wants to talk about, well, who made the first vow? Yaakov Avinu, when he had this incredible dream of the ladder and angels going up and down and God coming, and for all practical purposes conferring upon him that he's the next of the patriarchs. So what was the vow? It says, Vayidor Yaakov Neder. It says explicitly that Yaakov made a vow. Yaakov makes a vow and says, I'll come back to Eretz Yisrael. In other words, in the text, Yaakov's neder is, God, if you take care of me and you physically and spiritually, then you will be my God, and I will tithe everything I have for you. Tithing only happens in Eretz Yisrael. We only tithe produce in Eretz Yisrael. So Reb Shlomo is saying, it's as if he's saying, if you take care of me. Now remember, Yaakov is alone. He's, according to tradition, he's 63 years old. He has never left home before. And he's going into the unknown here. According to tradition also, he's penniless, doesn't have a penny to his name. And so he's asking for God's protection, which God promises him. So Reb Shlomo continues, a vow is when I realize I'm afraid I won't be able to do what I need to do. So I make a vow. I connect myself to the highest place in heaven, which is deeper than the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is brought down to this world. I'm going to fill in because I merited to hear some of these Torahs directly from Reb Shlomo. And what he's saying here, the reason a vow is so strong, why the Torah warns us not to make vows casually. Making a vow is a very serious business because we have to fulfill what we say we do. You make a vow, you're making like a promise. And you have to fulfill it. So why would the Torah allow us to make a vow? So Reb Shlomo is telling us, because sometimes in the natural course of events, we don't have the strength to do what we need to do. So what is the advice? To make a vow. Because when you make a vow, Reb Shlomo is saying you're in a certain way, you're going above the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu gave, and you're paving a path as if you're creating a mitzvah just between you and God. Because you're making a vow, you're going to do something. And the only one that is going to make sure that you keep it and knows about it and will hold you accountable is God. So Reb Shlomo is saying a really deep thing here. I'm going to read it again. It says, I connect myself to the highest place in heaven, which is deeper than the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is brought down to this world. It is connecting yourself to the Torah the way it is in heaven. Moshe Rabbeinu brought the Torah down to the world, but there are moments when the way the Torah is in this world isn't strong enough. In other words, if the Torah would inspire me enough or give me enough strength, I wouldn't have to make a vow. I'd have enough strength to do what I'm supposed to do. But here, obviously, I don't. So I have to go higher and deeper in my connection to my own neshama, to Hashem. And again, he doesn't say it here, but I heard it from his own lips. It's as if you're creating a mitzvah between you and God. You're making a vow, and so it's now your private mitzvah between you and God. So that's what I wanted to start this parsha with. It's a very, very strong idea here, this idea of making a vow. And Reb Shlomo doesn't say it here, but I'll add that the language in the Torah, when Moshe is explaining it to the people, he says, Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem. This is the thing that God is commanding. And then it gives the laws of vows. And we know that only Moshe Rabbeinu prophesied with the word Zeh. This exactly is what God is commanding. And so why here? Why by vows? It doesn't say all over that Moshe is commanding the people with the language of Zeh hadvar. This is the thing, is because that's the nature of a vow. The nature of a vow is, I'm making this vow because I don't see any other way I'm going to have strength to do this. This is what I need to be able to accomplish what I need to do. Okay, now we're going to page 399. And this is a fairly long Torah. And I'm going to try to get through the whole thing because it's an amazing flow of ideas. And so that's why I wanted to start the class with an explanation of what this parsha is about, because here, only at the end of this long Torah is he going to connect it to a vow. It seems that he's going way off tangent here and talking about other things which are really incredible what he's giving over here. But like halfway through it is like, well, what does this have to do with the parsha? Only at the end will we see how he connects everything he's about to say to the parsha. So I'm going to, in order to get through this, I'm going to have to read quite a bit at a time before I make any explanations. So here we go. So it's called Desperate Soul Masters. That's what he calls this piece. Or I should say differently. Those who edited the book called it. He didn't call it that, but based on what he said here, the editors called it Desperate Soul Masters. Okay, so Reb Shlomo starts. The holiness of the Mashiach is that we don't know when he is coming. We only know that he will come. The birth of children is the closest thing that gives you a taste of the coming of the Mashiach. Before a baby is born, you also know with God's help it will be born, but you don't know when. Nobody knows when. The question is not only if you believe the Mashiach is coming, the question is, what do you think of God? If you believe God created the world, then you have to ask yourself, is this world the way God wants it to be? Is this the world God created? I have to say, this is just a classic paradoxical question. Because on one hand, we believe that everything that happens is the way it's supposed to happen. Everything is divine providence. Everything is beshert. And so, in one sense, everything that's going on in the world is the way it's supposed to play itself out. But then you look at the world and you say, this is what God wanted? This is what God has in mind? So that's what Rabbi Shlomo is saying here. If you believe God created the world, then you have to ask yourself, is this the world the way God wants it to be? Is this the world God created? Did God create the world for people to sit here, make a few rubles, kill each other, and let their children do the same? There's got to be something deeper than that. So, and this is classic, the way Reb Shlomo would talk. So after you establish the fact that you really believe that God created the world, then you have to believe that someday the world has to be better. Because if you look at the world and you say, this can't be the way that God really wants it. On one hand, it must be because everything is coming from God. On the other hand, I can't believe that. I can't believe this is what God wants. So he says, though, ultimately, what we do have to believe, no matter how we solve that paradox, is that the world will be better. That we have to believe 100%. Now, the question is, how do you believe the world will get better? Some say that people will suddenly be enlightened. I'm sure this is also true. Or you can believe that a million things will begin to happen. But the way our prophets told us about the Mashiach is that he will be a person like you and me. So obviously, Reb Shlomo is saying a very important thing here, because some people have the notion that Mashiach will be some kind of perfected being. As we know, without discussing it could even attribute godly attributes. But he's saying, no, that's not the tradition that we've received. The Mashiach is a person, just like Moshe was a person, and David was a person, and Avram was a person. And they were like such spiritual giants, but nonetheless, they were human beings. They made mistakes. They had faults. They had limitations. The whole idea is that any person could be the Mashiach. Listen to what he says here. Any person could be the Mashiach. Maimonides makes it very clear in Hilchos Malachim, in chapter 11, the end of Mishnah Torah, that the way we Jews believe in the Mashiach is not the way we believe that someday the Mashiach will come. The way we believe in the coming of the Mashiach is that we are bringing him. Now, I'm not so sure where Reb Shlomo sees that in Rambam. It's not clear to me, but obviously it was clear to Reb Shlomo that between the lines, that is what the Rambam was saying. The point is, though, he's saying it's not enough just to believe that Mashiach is coming. We have to believe that we can bring him, that we can make a difference. Reb Shlomo continues, that's the whole point. If God wanted to bring the Mashiach, he could have brought him last year or the year before that. Why is he waiting so long? The whole idea is that God created the world and put man here so that he should bring the Mashiach and that man should fix the world. This is something we've discussed many times, that God did not finish creation and he left it for human beings to be partners with the rectification of the world. Remember, we learned this from the last words of the story of creation. Asher bara Elokim la'asot. That God made to do. And everyone asks, what do you mean to do? It's redundant, that God made. To do means that God made it in a way that we have to do the final part of it. And that's what Reb Shlomo was saying. It's not enough to believe that Mashiach will come. We have to believe that we can bring him and that we can play our part. The world isn't complete yet. God left it incomplete so that we would complete the world. These are Reb Shlomo's words. You see what it is. We are sitting here in this room, and there are so many people here. Obviously, he's talking to the people in the room. Each person is thinking and feeling something else. Each person is talking about something else with the person next to them. Now imagine one person walks into the room, and even though every person will continue talking to each other, there will be oneness in the room. You need one person to bring oneness into a certain place. The world needs one person whose soul is big enough to suddenly make one out of the world. That's all there is to it. And this human being will be a human being like you and me, but he will be absolutely saturated with God's oneness. So again, he's saying something very important here. He's almost saying two opposite things. Mashiach will have a power that no one else has ever had. That he will be able to bring the entire world together to oneness. And yet at the same time, he'll be a human being like you and me. The inner symptom, now Reb Shlomo continues, the inner symptoms of war or any type of conflict is that God's oneness isn't there. The prophets tell us, "Bayomahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad." On that day, God will be one and his name will be one. It's from Zechariah. The whole world will be one, and the beautiful thing is that it can happen in 5 minutes. In other words, it can happen at any time. In theory, Mashiach can come anytime. Be'ita achishena. In its time, it can be quickened. What kind of person are we talking about? Imagine the George Washington Bridge is broken, and two people apply for the job to fix it. One is the absolute greatest, most fantastic engineer, and the other one doesn't even know how to put one brick on top of the other. This other person doesn't even know what a bridge looks like, but gewalt is he desperate that the bridge should be fixed. He's absolutely desperate. Now we know why the editors named this Desperate Soul Masters. The way the world is running, if you take an expert, he will fix the bridge, but it will fall apart again. The way that God is running the world is that he chooses the one who is the most desperate for it to happen. You see, at this point, nobody in the world has been that desperate that the Mashiach should come. So he hasn't come yet. What he's saying in a very deep way is this is what the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the last 10 years of his life, was trying to do. He was trying to teach everyone, if we want Mashiach to come, we need to be a little bit more desperate that he comes. Not that just we daven every day, Mashiach should come. We have to feel it like in our inside of our insides, that how can we go on without Mashiach? And so it's very deep that Reb Shlomo is saying this, because it's really, really exactly what the Lubavitcher Rebbe was trying to get across to a whole generation, is we need to be desperate that Mashiach comes. I think I'll speak for myself, in the last 2.5 years, no, I'm not speaking just for myself. I know I'm speaking for a lot of people. There were moments during this war that a lot of people were like feeling desperate, like, God, like, you got to get involved here. It's like, we're at the end. How are we going to continue this way? That's what Reb Shlomo was saying. That's what desperate means. It's not even davening intensely. It's talking about a whole different type of attitude. And I can really remember moments, and I know it's not just me, that people when they would daven to Hashem as Rabbana Shalom, we like, this can't continue like this. Like, we're desperate for Mashiach. We're desperate for you to help us. So Reb Shlomo says, imagine this one person who will be the most desperate that the Mashiach should come. He is the one who will be Mashiach. Did you hear what he just said? The one who is most desperate for Mashiach to come, he will be the Mashiach. It's an amazing insight here. Reb Shlomo continues, the Holy Baal Shem Tov brought down the concept of Rebbes, soul masters. A soul master is someone who loves you so much that he's desperate for you to make it. I've seen parents who act like they know everything. They are good people, sweet people, but their children didn't make it in life. I don't mean that their children didn't succeed and become lawyers and doctors. I'm talking about not making it on an neshama level. I see little people, water carriers, shoemakers, tailors, and bakers, whose children made it because their parents were really so desperate that their children should make it. They really wanted it with all their hearts. What's the difference between a rabbi and a rebbe? A rabbi is someone who knows the law. He knows what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. When you ask him something, it's like he's a little book. It's like when you need directions on a journey. You drive into a gas station and they give you a map. But what happens if your car is broken? Does a map help? So the person working at the gas station says, I can give you a map, but I can show you how to get there. But I'm sorry. Oh, no. He says, the person working the gas station says, I can give you a map. I can even show you how to get there, but I'm sorry, I can't fix your car. A Rebbe fixes your car. He says, it's much deeper than all this. When I come into this gas station and my car is broken, a real true soul master says to me, you know something? Your car wasn't broken. You just didn't push the right buttons, but I'll teach you how to do it. If it's a super soul master, he says, obviously, you don't know how to get there. I'll go with you. So he's making it like a differentiation, like how much a person is willing to help another person. Now, the last paragraph, he gets to our parsha. So like this whole Torah just was a classic in of itself, but now he connects it to the parsha. And he says, so in this week's parsha, we read that when you make a vow and you don't keep it, you can still fix it. The beauty of this part, because I told you in the beginning, it tells you how to make a vow, but it also tells you how to annul a vow. If you made it by mistake, you changed your mind, you didn't mean it, you were impulsive. What do you do when you make a vow and then you realize, I shouldn't have made that vow? I'll remind everyone that it's customary, Erev Rosh Hashanah, to do what's called Hatarat Nedarim, to annul your vows right before Rosh Hashanah. That's how important it is. And if you didn't do it, what can work for you is Kol Nidre. Kol Nidre. It's one of the most emotional prayers of the year, but most people don't realize it's talking about making vows. That is what Kol Nidre is. We have this incredible nusach that can make you cry just to hear it. But really what you're saying something is very technical about annulling vows. So Reb Shlomo ends and says, the Rabbanu She'olam, the master of the world, promises us that there will always be heads of tribes. There will always be people in the world who are mamish so desperate that you can get back into shape, even if, so to speak, your very soul is broken. These are the Rashei Mattot, the heads of the tribes, the soul masters. So that's why this parsha is called Mattot, which means the tribes, the heads of the tribes. And then Moshe introduces the idea of vows. And Rashi tells, what's the connection? Why does Moshe have to bring together the heads of the tribes? So it's explained that this is symbolic of that if you go to someone who has the power, you can annul a vow. So that's why he called all of the heads of the tribes to indicate one of the ways that you can annul a vow. The other reason is, as I said, this is the last parsha of the fourth book, the book of Numbers, Bamidbar. And in a certain sense, it's the changing of the guard. Moshe already knows he's not going into Eretz Yisrael. In last week's parsha, he's already appointed Yehoshua as the next leader. And now he's calling on the heads of the tribes to step up and help make the continuity between the generations. L'chaim, l'chaim. So that's what we can do for Parashat Mattot. And now we're going to go to Parashat Masei. And this is on page 409 for people who have the book. So there's really only two Torahs for all of Parashat Masei. So we'll go through the first one, about a third of it, and a little bit of the second one. So just so everyone knows, he's going to explain it immediately. But the way Parashat Masei means travels, journeys. These are the journeys that the children of Israel made during the 40 years in the desert. And the Parsha begins by literally going through the history and all of the places that we camped. And there's something very unique about it, because the way that this part of the Parsha is chanted, there's only twice in the whole Torah that it's chanted with a special, call it nigun, special chant. The only other time is when we crossed the Red Sea and we sang the Song of the Sea. It's the same tune, the same nigun. So Reb Shlomo says like this: before we came to the Holy Land, we made 42 stops, because in Parashat Masei, it lists 42 different encampments that we traveled and we stopped in. He also points out this portion is also the 42nd portion of the Torah. Everyone knows that the Torah finishes with Bamidbar, because Devarim is already a repetition. Moshe Rabbeinu is going over everything, but after 42 stops, it is somewhat the end. So he's just pointing out this idea that in a certain sense, we're coming to the end of the Torah. Obviously, there's still the book of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, but as I said, it takes place during 37 days. It's in a certain way one long speech of Moshe Rabbeinu, his last will and testament. So Reb Shlomo continues, we also know that everyone in their lifetime has 42 stops. So this is a very, very well-known Torah from the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov in general, we take it for granted, but one of the greatest innovations of the Baal Shem Tov is everything we read in the Torah, every story, every number, every name, every mitzvah, and especially because today, most of the mitzvahs we actually don't do. So the question is, well, why do we have to know these 42 stops? It happened during the 40 years in the desert. What does that mean to me today? So the Baal Shem Tov's basic, called philosophy of learning Torah was everything in the Torah is everlastingly relevant. So he made the comment that these 42 stops are not just what happened in the 40 years, that every person, every soul that comes down to the body symbolically goes through these 42 stops. And therefore, many, many different commentaries point out the names of these stops and what we can learn from them. We stopped here, and then we traveled to there, and we stopped, and then we traveled to there, and they all have names. And different commentaries find great significance in the names and how it's relevant to us today. So that's what Reb Shlomo is referring to. He says, but also know that everyone in their lifetime has 42 stops. The holy tzaddikim, especially the Baal Shem Tov, told us that someone with clear eyesight could read their whole life story through this portion. Eila Masei b'nei Yisrael. These are the journeys of b'nei Yisrael. Every Jew in the world goes through so many journeys. So that's what he's pointing out. He's pointing out really a classic Chassidic understanding. So then he says, listen to what the Holy Rishner says. There's such a thing as walking, Halicha. That is also the root of the word halacha, Jewish law. And then there is a thing called moving, which is what our Parsha, Eila Masei b'nei Yisrael, is about. So in other words, there's walking and there's moving, journeying, traveling. When I walk, I'm going to correct the way it's said here. When I walk, I don't necessarily change my headspace. I'm the same person. I just keep on walking. This happens spiritually as well. A person can keep on walking and think that they become better, but they remain in the same person. But when you actually move away from one place and you go to another place, it's something else. So in other words, what he's trying to explain here, a subtlety that you can walk 100 miles, but you're going to be the same person at the end. But then there are times that we move, and we can move 10 feet. We can move not at all. We're moving in our head, and we come out being completely different people. That's what he's trying to contrast. The idea of moving but getting nowhere because you're not really changing inside, and moving in a way that you really change. So Reb Shlomo says like this: a person has to know that they have to keep on moving. The saddest thing in the world is if you are always just walking, but you're always the same, then nothing happens. There are people you met 10 years ago, and you meet them again today, and they're absolutely the same. He said it's terrible. This is one level of walking. But then there's a whole different level called Masei b'nei Yisrael. When you move, you have got to move away. You can't stay in the same place if you want to change. All the walking in the world won't help if you're not going to be committed to change. So he says the holiness of Avraham Avinu was that it says by him, it says, Vayisa haloch b'nasoa hanegba. A very, very important verse about Avraham Avinu. In Orchard of Delights, Fruits of the Orchard, I write on this pasuk a lot. It's a very, very significant because it says actually 3 different languages of movement. Vayisa haloch b'nasoa. And you need 3 different adjectives for walking, traveling, and journeying. Always to the Negev, to the south. And so Rav Ginsburg explains that in general, we face east. Even if we're not physically facing east, in a mental construct, we're always facing east. Therefore, south is always chesed. South is negba. So Rav Ginsburg explains, what does it mean he's always going to the Negev? It doesn't mean he's always going to the Negev desert. It means he's always traveling towards chesed. That's what it means. He's always traveling towards chesed. So Reb Shlomo says the holiness of Avraham Avinu was that it says by him, again, this verse of 3 types of traveling. Not only was he walking every second of his life, he was moving as well. Haloch v'nesoa. What does this mean? So one of the Rebbes said that a day after meeting Avraham Avinu, you wouldn't even recognize him because he reached a new level. In the deepest depths, why do we say Shema twice a day? Why not once a day, once a week, once a month? Why do we have to say Shema twice a day? So he says, because we are supposed to be different people. The Yiddah who knew God last night is not the same Jew as this morning. Why do we always say good morning or good night to each other? Because we hope that when I saw you last night and I see you today, you are not the same person. So over the years, I heard many different stories from Reb Shlomo talking about different Rebbes, and he would bring the same Torah, that, and especially the way someone looks during the 6 days of the week, and how someone looks on Shabbos. And I'll just share a personal experience, because I merited over the years to have approximately 100 Shabboses with Reb Shlomo. And many, many times on Friday, I would visit him at his house, and he would be dead tired. And that week, he could have been on 3 different continents. He could have done literally 7 different concerts and been up all night talking to people and teaching and on planes. So a lot of times I would see him on Friday, a couple hours before Shabbos, and he was drained, really drained. And then I would go to shul like everyone else. And I had this experience countless times. When he would walk into shul on Shabbos, he would be shining. And I'm not using that word just like figuratively. His face would be beaming with joy and energy and Shabbat atmosphere. And I got to experience this many, many, many times. So that's what he's trying to say here, is that listen, we're human beings, but we should have goals. And what he's saying is the way you were yesterday, it's not how you're supposed to be today. And the way you are today is not the way you're supposed to be tomorrow. That's what's called moving. If not, we're just kind of plodding along. He used the word walking. We're just walking, and there's no change. No changes are occurring. Okay, we have time for just 2 little more paragraphs. And this is on page 413. And he says like this: by a Siyum Masechta, you always have to connect the beginning to the end. A Siyum Masechta is when someone finishes a tractate of Gemara, a tractate of Mishnah, a whole book, whatever. A Siyum means a completion. You're completing a learning project. And it's very customary to make a celebration, a su'udah. And he's saying, though, that there's an idea that when you, and there's also a tradition that you say a Devar Torah. And he's saying that a lot of times what you're trying to do is connect the beginning to the end. So he says like this. So what's the connection to the end of Bamidbar to the beginning of Bamidbar? One second. I think there could be a mistake here. I think because you'll see from the second paragraph, I think he's trying to say, so what's the connection to the end of Bamidbar and the beginning of Bereshit? Is it the next paragraph? He says the first Rashei at the beginning of the Torah is Amar Rav Yitzchak, and Rashei asks a rhetorical question: why doesn't the Torah begin with Kiddush HaChodesh? Why doesn't the Torah begin with the first mitzvah? This is the very first Rashei in the entire Torah. He asks the question, why does the Torah begin with the creation of the world? Why, since Torah literally means instruction, why doesn't it begin with the first mitzvah, which is the first instruction? But he answers, Rashi answers, Koach ma'asav higid la'amal letet lehem nachalat goyim. The power of his deeds, he told his people, in order to give them an inheritance in the land of Israel. So he points out the first thing in the Torah is that God wants you to know that God created the world and gave us Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so this I have to explain. He's saying something like really important here. Again, he's treating the end of Bamidbar as if it's the end of the Torah. So we're making a Siyum. We're making a completion. So what's the connection with the end of the Torah and the beginning of the Torah? Rashi does this all the time. What's the connection between the previous Torah portion and the next Torah portion? But here he's taking the entire Torah. And we know that on Simchas Torah, when we end the Torah and we begin the Torah. And so scores of Chassidic Torahs that we take the last letter of the Torah, which is a Lamed, and the first letter of the Torah, which is a Bet, and it spells Lev, heart, connecting the real end of the Torah with the beginning of the Torah. So what Reb Shlomo is pointing out that Rashi explains, so why does the Torah begin with the story of creation? Why doesn't it begin with the first mitzvah? So he answers, and he says prophetically, Rashi spoke 1,000 years ago. He said, in the future, the nations of the world will come and say to Israel, Listimatem, you're robbers, you're thieves. You stole Eretz Yisrael. Does this sound familiar in the United Nations? Does this sound familiar in the Arab world, the Muslim world? Great parts of the Western world at this point, on campuses all over the place. Listimatem, you stole Eretz Yisrael. So Rashi said, well, what are we gonna answer them? And so the way we answer them is why the Torah has to begin with the creation of the world. And we answer them, the same God who created the world, he gave us Eretz Yisrael. That's why the Torah begins from Bereshit. So Reb Shlomo is mentioning that because how is the Torah ending in Bamidbar? In Parashat Pinchas, and in Parashat Masei. Parashat Masei is the most detailed description of the borders of Eretz Yisrael. And Parashat Pinchas and Mattot and Masei is all about the new generation going into the land who are going to inherit the land. And so the Torah is ending with Moshe getting them prepared to come into Eretz Yisrael and to take inheritance in the land of Israel. And then at the end of this Torah, and we're running out of time, I heard him say this many, many times. Actually, the last thing in Parashat Bamidbar is in Parashat Pinchas, we have the whole story of the daughters of Tzelofchad. The 5 daughters of Tzelofchad who come to Moshe and say, after it's been explained that it seems like only men can get an inheritance in Eretz Yisrael. So the daughters of Tzelofchad come and say, well, our father didn't have sons. He only had daughters. Why shouldn't we be able to inherit? And Moshe did not know how to answer them. He asked God, and God says, they're correct. Women also, of course, have an inheritance, and he explains how women have an inheritance in Eretz Yisrael. But the very end of the Torah is that if the daughters of Tzelofchad marry into a different tribe, and what's going to happen is that the inheritance is going to end up in a different tribe than Manasseh, where the daughters of Tzelofchad come from. And so they made a decree for one generation that you can only marry in your tribe. And that's what happened. But right at the end, it says that Moshe helped arrange that all the daughters of Tzelofchad got married. And so Reb Shlomo used to love this Torah. He said, look how the Torah is ending, not only with this idea of the inheritance in the land, but Moshe Rabbeinu is a Shadchan. He's making shidduchim. That's how the Torah ends. Torah ends with weddings, and of course, all the inheritances are built on building a Bayit Ne'aman b'Yisrael. You can have all the inheritance in the world, but if you don't have a strong families, the whole thing will fall apart. And that's how the Torah is ending. So that's right. We didn't read it, but in Evan Shlomo, he says it. Okay, so may we all merit. Everyone who needs to get married should be able to get married. Everyone who needs to come to Eretz Yisrael and find their inheritance should happen at the right time. While we're at it, everyone who needs to have children should have children. Everyone who's waiting for grandchildren should be able to have grandchildren. And we should have everything good.